Please be seated. The court is now back in session. The floor is given to the International Deputy Co-Prosecutor to resume the questioning. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, we were talking about the security offices in Sector 105, and I wanted to read to you an excerpt from your OCIJ interview, E3 5178, Khmer ERN 00197862, English 00274-101, French 00485-186. And this is what you said about the security offices. Quote, K11 was a temporary detention center, and the detainees will be sent to Nong Khalik if they were considered as correctable prisoners, and to Phnom Krau if they were considered as heavy prisoners. The chance of survival is very rare for those who were sent to Phnom Krau. End of quote. Does that refresh your memory, Mr. Witness? Is it correct that there was a temporary detention center at K11 and a security office at Phnom Krau for heavy prisoners?
Answer, that is true.
Who were considered heavy prisoners, and how did you know that heavy prisoners were sent to the Phnom Krau security office?
Answer. The heavy or serious prisoners was those who joined with the Vietnamese.
And you said that the chance of survival was very rare for those sent to Phnom Krau. You said this in your OCIJ interview. How did you know that?
Answer. There are some survivors. Not all of them died, and one or two survive the security center and are living.
Can you tell us who are the, how many survivors from the Phnom Krau security office do you know who are still alive?
Answer. One of my in-law who passed away last month used to be in the detention together with Tasi, and that in-law survived the regime.
And that was going to be my next question. You indicated in your OCIJ or DCCAM interviews that you had some relatives detained at Phnom Krau. You just indicated you had in-law. How many relatives did you have who were detained at Phnom Krau, and why were they sent to that prison?
Answer. They were arrested but not yet killed immediately. They were placed in the detention for 1 week, for example, and for minor prisoners or offenders were sent to Nongalik, and for the serious offenders were sent away and killed. Few of them survived the regime. Wing, my in-law, my younger in-law, survived the security office and described about the time when he was detained in that prison, said to witness.
And did you have any relatives who were sent to Phnom Krau who did not survive the regime?
Answer. I would like to recall their names. Those who were arrested together with my uncle never returned. Many of them, whom I cannot count all their names, they have never returned. Only one or two came back, and my younger in-law, as I said, came back and returned, and the others, I could not recall their names, went back to their birth villages.
Were all these relatives people who were arrested at the same time as your uncle Kasi?
They were related to him, and also they were neighbors of him.
Are you able to describe for the court the Phnom Krau security office? What did that security office look like?
Answer. That security office was not equal to a place to keep the cattle, and that security office could house perhaps 100 prisoners. The wall was made from bamboo with a thatch roof, and there were fences surrounding that security office, which the prisoner could not flee. I have never heard that inmates could be able to flee.
Did you see that security office yourself? And if so, can you tell us when it was that you saw the Phnom Krau security office?
Answer. That office, security office, was on the road where I used to walk past, but I did not have the authority to walk into that security office. I could see from the place where I was, from the road where I was walking on, about 50 or 100 meters away from that location. Those who walked past that security office could see it.
And do you know who was in charge of the security office at Phnom Krau?
Answer. Pai.
Who was Pai? What was what part of the what sector unit or organization was Pai in?
Answer. Pai was originally from that district. He was a soldier. First, he was a soldier. He was the commander of the Orang district. Later on, he was reassigned to be in charge of that security office.
And was he a sector, a soldier, who was under the command of the sector military chief, Ta Sopia?
Answer. He was part of the district army. He was under Sophia, since Ta Sophia was the high ranking commander.
And I wanted to ask you what you know about the executions of prisoners at Phnom Krau. Do you know where prisoners from Phnom Krau were taken for execution?
Answer. I learned that from the prisoners. Once a while, a vehicle would come in to transport prisoners out. I do not know how many prisoners were taken out per time.
Where was it that the prisoners were taken to when they were taken away for execution?
Answer. Sometimes, if they were in a small group, they were not sent far away for execution. When they were in a large group, they were transported by a vehicle to Karachi province. And the large group of prisoners could not be killed at a nearby location.
Did you know a location named Trapiang Pring?
Answer. Tribunal was the location past the intersection to Royo.
And was Trapiang Pring, how far was Trapiang Pring from the Roya worksite where you were located?
It was not too far from one another. It was about 3 or 4 kilometers apart.
Did you ever have occasion to travel by the Trapiang Pring, and did you see what was going on at that site?
Answer. And I have never went past that Trapang Pring. I saw the earth was shoved or bulldozed, but I did not go there into the center.
I want to read to something you said in your OCIJ interview, Mr. Witness. This is E3 5178, Khmer ERN 00197-858, English 00274-096 through 97, French 00485-181 through 182. This is what you told OCIJ. Quote, "The killing site, called Trapiang Pring, was about 4 kilometers from Konye, and it was on the road from Konye to Krachi province. A tractor was used to dig big pits, and they were covered up with dirt after the killing. I saw those pits with my eyes. The killing site was buried by bulldozing by a tractor. I was living at the killing site during the period of killings." End of quote. Later on in this interview, a few pages later, you say that you used to travel and cross the vicinity of Trapiang Pring and saw this from a distance. Can you clarify and explain to us, did you go by the Trapiang Pring site and ever see tractors that were digging graves?
I object, Mr. President. Again, same as my first objection, the quote is out of context. He is giving this evidence in relation to the purpose of collecting statistics data of victims from 1983 to 85. Apparently, in relation to something called Anger Day, he was involved in the collecting of human bones. So that's where he offered this evidence. It's true that he later then says something about Trapiang Pring, but that's only hearsay. So quoting this out of context without saying that it is testimony from something post-79 is the reason I object to this.
Mr. President, the statement says, "I saw it with my eyes," but I intend very much to clarify with the witness what he saw and what he heard from others. Counsel is incorrect. The words are clear in his interview, but I certainly intend to find out what he has personal knowledge of.
Not about what, Mr. President, it's about when. When did he see it?
The context has been provided by you now, sir.
So the question, Mr. Witness, did you see tractors and digging pits at Trapiang Pring? And if so, when was it that you saw this?
But
Answer. Regarding those pits, everyone could see, not only me. When the road was bulldozed, it was the pits was located about 100 meters apart from the road which was being constructed. Everyone who traveled by could see those pits. As for the execution itself, I did not witness the execution, but there was a soldier saying that those locations included the pits where bodies were buried.
And was it during the regime between 1975 and 1978 that you saw pits being dug 100 meters from the road? And if so, can you explain why you were traveling on that road? What was the occasion on which you saw these pits being dug.
Answer. They dug that pit between in the period of 1977. I used to travel by that area since I was working in a royal worksite. Everyone could see that pit located about 1 kilometer away from the road.
You also just mentioned that you were told about what took place at Trapping Pring by a sector soldier. Who was the sector soldier who told you about killings at that site?
Answer. He was not a district soldier, he was sector soldier who was monitoring me. His name was Bun.
Do you know whether Bun was one of the soldiers who carried out executions at Trapping Pring?
Answer. He was the guard who monitoring us at the field.
When you were at the working at the Roya worksite, did you ever see trucks transporting people on the road that went to Trapping Pring?
Answer. When I was at a royal worksite, I did not know that those people were sent to that center, and the meetings were held, and I knew that people were sent away by trucks to a location which I did not know, and those who were related to Tachun were arrested.
When you say that people were sent away from trucks, are you talking about people who were sent away from the Roya worksite, or were these people who were being sent away from some other location? Can you clarify that?
Answer. To my knowledge, those people were taken from a royal location.
And let me just read to you, I want to make sure this is clear, an excerpt from your OCIJ interview E3 5178, Khmer ERN 00197-861, English 00274-099, French 00485-185. You said, I quote, K-11 office was at the current military fort. When I was at the work site, I saw about 30 people transported in and out every 2 or 3 days. The victims were transported out for execution. End of quote. And so this is clear, Mr. Witness, when you referred to being at a work site and seeing 30 people transported in and out every 2 or 3 days, what site were you referring to? Where was it that you saw this?
Answer. People used to be taken out of the location of the security guard, and I was on the ox cart, and at the time I was not. I was walking, and I saw an ox cart transporting those people on.
So to make sure I understand correctly, these were not people who were being taken away from your work site. These were people you saw being transported out of the security office. Do I understand correctly?
President, please observe the microphone, Mr. Witness, before you speak. Witness. Yes, those people were taken out from the security office.
Was there also an occasion in which you saw some trucks of people being transported who you recognized as people from the Khao Sema district office? Do you remember that, and can you describe that incident for the court?
Answer. There was one day when after I was transferred to Royo, I was asked to herd 2 water buffaloes. My group of workers included my younger relative, chased the buffaloes past the commerce office of Tachun. And at the time I was thirsty, and I went to ask for water to drink. At the time, I saw a vehicle stood close to that office, and I approached close to that vehicle, and I asked for water. I used the water containers to pick up the water to drink, and it was on the day that I went to ask for water to drink. And at that time, those who used to be with me at the Khao Sema office told me that about 80 of my former co-workers were arrested. And at the time, I told that guy that I was not arrested. And at the time, I was in a hurry to bring some water for my group of workers herding the water buffaloes to drink, so I did not spend much time chit-chatting with that guy.
And when you refer to 80 co-workers who were arrested, who were these people? Who was this group of 80 people who were arrested?
Yes, I can recall a few names, but not everyone's. There were some ordinary people, and there were some of those who worked in the district office, as well as some soldiers. The district office was Pop, who was a Phnom, and Pai, a Khmer person. And there were several others whose name I can recall now, but if you want, I can write them down. But I need to think for a while before I can do that.
That's okay. You've given a lot of names in your various interviews. What I just wanted to clarify, that this group of 80 people, were they people who were relatives or connected to Cam Poon, the person who at one time was the sector deputy secretary, Or was this a different group of 80 people? Can you clarify that?
No, they were not in the network of Kampung, but the network of Kasi.
ហើយក៏មិនមែនសាច់ញាតិខ្ញុំ
And they were not my relatives,
គាត់តែស្គាល់គ្នាធ្លាប់
but I knew them since we worked together.
I'll turn to another subject now. Do you remember whether Q-Samphan ever visited your sector? And if so, can you describe what you remember about that event?
បាទតាម
Through my recollection, in 1974, I went to Harvest Rise to support the sector. At that time, our weapons were removed. We were a group of bodyguards from various districts. And I was wondering why the weapons were removed from us. Then one of the deputy of Office 16 said Q-Samphan would come to visit our province. And I asked them what was the reason for the removal of our weapon. And we were told that they did not trust us since he had his own bodyguards. And then I paid my attention to harvesting the rice, and that was the occasion that I heard about him. And I recall that Hu Nim actually came to inspect our area, and he shook hands with me. That was in around late 1971 or early 1972. And that's when I personally met him. But as for Q-Samphan, I did not see him, and I only heard about his tentative visit.
So I understand correctly, you yourself did not see Q-Samphan or his delegation when they came to Mondulkiri, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
I want to read an excerpt from your OCIJ interview, again E3 5178, Khmer 00197-866, English 00274-104, French 00485-190. This is what you said about Q-Samphan. Quote, in 1974, Q-Samphan, head of the state and front chairman, visited in Mondulkiri province somewhere at K11 when I was harvesting rice. Continuing, he came for about 2 or 3 and paid visits to O Bun Krom, Srey Hui, and the dam construction. He came with a delegation of many people, 6 vehicles in total. End of quote. How did you, since you didn't see the delegation, how did you know that Q-Samphan visited K11 and visited the dam construction site at O Bun Krom?
It was the deputy chief of Office K11 who told me. I saw the vehicles moving on the road while I was in a rice field. I saw the car convoy, but I didn't see him, and I was told that the convoy was his, and that was the deputy chief of the office who told us about it.
And just to clarify something, was it the deputy chief of K11, the sector military office, who told you, or the deputy chief of K16, the sector commerce office? Can you clarify?
He was the deputy chief of office K16, and he was a civilian, not a military person.
And one last question: when was it that the O Bun Krom Dam was built? What year was that dam constructed?
To my knowledge, the Obun Kram and Obun Le were built at the same time, that is in around 1974, and it was completed in 1977.
Thank you. Let me turn now to some questions about some specific events that took place in your sector. First, do you remember an incident in which a group of men from possibly from Khao Sema district tried to flee to Vietnam sometime in 1977? Do you remember that incident?
Yes, I recall that. There were 18 of them who fled from office K16. However, I cannot recall the date, and that happened in around mid or late 1977. It was around August of that year.
Do you know why this group of 18 men tried to flee to Vietnam?
Those people were implicated in the network of Kasi. Kasi was killed although he was a party member, and those people were inducted into the party by Kasi. So they became scared after they knew that Kasi had been killed, and for that reason they fled.
Do you remember the names of some of the 18 men who fled because of what had happened to Kasi?
Yes, I can recall some names. There were Sien, alias Nyun, Lam, Lang, Clark, Nguyen, and there was also my uncle Vun amongst them. As for the rest, I cannot recall their names now.
Who was Nun?
was a minority ethnic in Khao Sema, and he was a group chief.
May have been my pronunciation. I wasn't referring to Bun Nun. I was referring to the Nun who was the head of the office of the men that fled. Did you know what was the name of the person who was the head of the group of 18 that fled?
I think you pronounced the name incorrectly. It's Nyun. He was chief of Office K16, and he was the one who was in charge of the group who fled.
Thank you. Indeed, I did not pronounce that correctly. You also mentioned a person named Lam. Who was Lam?
At that time, Lam was an ordinary combatant. He didn't hold any position.
Do you know if Lam survived after fleeing and returned to Cambodia after the end of the Khmer Rouge regime?
Yes, he is still living now.
I want to read to you an excerpt from an OCIJ interview of Lam. This is document E3/5221, E3/5221, Khmer ERN 00236-701, English 00239-491, French 00267-790. This is how Lam described this event. Quote, "In 1977, my chief Nguyen attended the meeting and was told by the sector secretary that Khao Sema people were all Vietnamese heads on Khmer bodies, and they all betrayed Angkar. So Nguyen came to tell his subordinate cadres to flee to Vietnam for fear of being killed. Those who fled with Nguyen included me, Lang, and then he lists a few other people. Those who fled with me included a number of children who got lost in the forest, and then they went back and later were arrested and killed by Angkar." Mr. Witness, Lam says that there was a meeting at which the sector secretary announced that Khao Sema people were all Vietnamese heads of Khmer bodies. Did you hear about this meeting, Mr. Witness?
As for the nature of meeting, usually such accusation was not raised. For example, that they were Vietnamese heads on Khmer bodies. However, such rumors existed at the time.
I want to ask you about the wives of the group of 18 men who fled. Did their wives go with them, or did they stay in Sector 105 when their husbands fled?
to my knowledge, after the husbands fled, next day the family members, that is the wives and the children, were arrested.
Do you know whether the wives and children were accused of any wrongdoing, or whether they were arrested because of what their husbands and father had done?
I did not know about that. It is my conclusions that they had been arrested because the husbands and the fathers had fled to the Vietnamese side, and I myself did not witness such arrest. By that time, I had left K16 to live in Royal.
How did you hear about this incident?
Usually, information would pass between offices, for example, from office K16 to other offices or to Royal, where I was. That's how I heard about it.
Do you remember the names of some of the wives of the men who fled to Vietnam?
I can recall a few names. Cầm Hiến was Nhun's wife, and Cầm Hien's document actually was found at the Tools Lane. And Lee was Lam's wife, and Lươn was Lang's wife, and Horn was Bôn Nương wife. These are the names that I can recall.
Do you know what happened to the wives and children of these men after they were arrested?
They disappeared since. I did not know what had happened to them. However, if they are alive, then I would see them. I did not know whether they were sent to Tools Line prison or they were executed along the way.
Mr. President, with your leave at this time, I'd like to provide a document for the witness to review. This is document E3/1645, E3/1645, which is a list of over 140 prisoners from Montecurie, Sector 105 and Division 920, who entered S21 on the 23rd of November 1977. And I'd like to ask the witness about some of the names on this list, with your leave.
Yes, you may do that.
Mr. Witness, I'd like to direct your attention to a certain part of this S21 list. I've put some post-its. There are 2 pages in particular that I want to direct your attention towards, and in particular to prisoners' names, numbers 106 to 109, number 130, and numbers 135 to 138, 140, and 142 to 143. To make it easy for you, those names I've highlighted in yellow. If you could look at the names on the flag pages of the names that are highlighted in yellow, the numbers I just read, a total of 12 females. And could you tell the court whether you recognize any of those names, and if you know who those women are?
Miền trong nó tại hội đi chim ran sum chim
I have a quick look at these names, and from my first look at it, I'm not familiar with any of these names.
Let me direct you specifically to some of the people on this list, Mr. Witness. Let's start with number 130. This is a woman, full name Seng Prin, alias Kim Hin. She is identified as the wife of Sros Nun. You identified to us a few minutes earlier a female who was married to Nguyen named Kim Hin. Can you tell us whether the person identified at number 130 was the wife of Nguyen?
Witness, please hold on, and Counsel Copper, you have the floor.
I object to this question. Also, observing in relation to earlier remarks and questions about this document, prosecution is misrepresenting the documents. All female prisoners mentioned in this document are first of all referred to as combatants of either Office K16 or K11, and also referred to as wives of, but to present the evidence as them being identified only as the wives of is incomplete. Primarily they are identified as combatants.
I'm asking at this point the witness simply if he can identify the person. It is correct, they're identified as people from K16 office, but they are also identified with names and as the wives of. So my first question to you, the person at number 130, Mr. Witness, was that the wife of Nguyen, the person you identified as the chief of Office K16 the head of the group of 18 that fled to Vietnam.
President, Mr. Witness, please look at the serial number 130 and duty counsel, please assist the witness. You can find the serial number at 130 and please respond to the question if you know or do not know this woman. Witness. As for Kim Hin, I do not know her birth name. However, I knew that her husband fled away, and Kim Hin was a wife of Nyun, and they both had a son. However, I was not there when she was arrested.
And the wives of the 18 men who fled, did they also work at the K-16 office?
They were workers at Office K-16, and they were classified as ordinary combatants or workers of that office. However, Kim Hin was chief of the female group.
When I asked you to name the names of some of the wives, you also referred to Lam's wife, Lee. Could you look at number 142 on the list, a woman, female identified as Srun Lee, and described in the description as the wife of Lam. Is this the person that you told us about earlier, who was the wife of Lam, one of the people who fled to Vietnam?
Yes, that is correct.
You mentioned a woman named Hun, who was married to Lang. Could you please look at number 106 on the list? That's on the previous page, number 106. A woman identified as Nong Hun and described as the wife of Lang. Is this the same person that you referred to earlier? Again, the wife of one of the people, one of the group of 18 that fled to Vietnam.
Yes, that is true.
Did you ever hear, Mr. Witness, anything about why the wives of these men were arrested and sent to S-21? Did you ever hear anything about that?
Witness, please hold on, and Counsel Copper, you have the floor.
I object to this question, Mr. President. I objected earlier. It's a bit sexist, actually, to only refer to them as wives of. Primarily, they're referred to as combatants. So to say that they were arrested because they were wives is, if we take this document as a starting point, incorrect. It seems they were arrested because they were combatants, working as combatants in that particular office. And to keep saying that they were arrested because they were the wives is incorrect. So I object.
Again, counsel is trying to give evidence himself in this courtroom.
well, simply to complete what the objection of my colleague. A few minutes ago, the co-prosecutor put the same question to the witness, and he said that he did not know why the wives had been arrested, and he already said it. He said that he reached certain conclusions, but he did not know himself why they had been arrested.
Let me rephrase, Mr. President, and let me make this part my last question before the break. Let me refer you to, Mr. Witness, to something you said in your interviews. This is E3/5636. E3/5636, Khmer 000-42484, English 00711-224, French 00727-140. You were discussing here the arrest of Nguyen's wife. Question: was she, Kim Hin, arrested because of her husband, or what? Answer: she did nothing. She was arrested because of her husband. Lines of the wife whose husbands had fled to Vietnam were arrested. End of quote. What did you mean, Mr. Witness, when you told DC Cam that lines of the wife whose husbands had fled to Vietnam were arrested?
I have actually responded to this kind of question. I did not really understand what happened at the time. However, if the husband was accused of betrayal, then the wife and the children would not be spared, and they will be arrested and killed. So I don't actually understand the nature of your question. Usually when the father was arrested and killed, the children would also be arrested and killed. The time is convenient for our lunch break. We take a break now and resumed at 1:30 this afternoon. Court officer, please assist the witness during the lunch break at the waiting room reserved for witnesses and civil parties, and invite him as well as his duty counsel back into the courtroom at 1:30. Security personnel, you are instructed to take Kyo Sampon to the waiting room downstairs and have him returned to attend the proceedings this afternoon before 1:30. The court